Morning. My name is John Barcelo, Deputy Director for the Arizona Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, and Reentry. I will be speaking on behalf of the department. However, I will not be answering any questions today. Victim representatives did not attend today's execution and will not be present for this briefing. We kindly ask that you respect their privacy. After my remarks, you'll hear from Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays. She will not be taking any questions here in this room. However, you may reach out to her media team with any follow-up questions that you may have. Following Attorney General Mays, you will hear from media witnesses who will share their observations and answer any questions that you may have. I will now provide remarks on behalf of ADCRR. Today, by order of the Arizona Supreme Court, the state of Arizona carried out the death sentence of Leroy McGill by means of lethal injection at the Arizona State Prison Complex here in Florence. Mr. McGill's last meal included onion rings, bread and butter, chocolate cake, cottage pie, and a green salad. Mr. McGill elected to have a spiritual advisor in the room with him during this process. Mr. McGill was brought into the execution chamber at 10:01 a.m., and ADCRR staff read the warrant of execution at 10:09 a.m. Shortly thereafter, Mr. McGill gave his last statement, which I'll read momentarily. The IV procedure began at 10:05 a.m. and was complete at 10:08 a.m. The drug protocol began at 10:11 a.m. and was completed at 10:14 a.m. Mr. McGill was pronounced dead at 10:26 a.m. ADCRR Director Ryan Thornell was present for the execution. He has notified the governor's office that the sentence has been carried out and provided them with the time of death. In coordination with the Office of Inspector General, the medical examiner has taken custody of the body and will be issuing a certificate of death. I personally observed the process and events today, including the execution. I can say that the process went according to ADCRR policy and procedure. As you will hear from witnesses today, Mr. McGill did not put up any sort of resistance during this process. The medical team went about their work according to procedure. During the administration of the drug protocol, Mr. McGill took a few deep, heavy breaths, followed by a short snoring sound. Today's process went according to plan and without any incident. When asked if he would like to provide any last words, Mr. McGill proceeded to say, "I just want to thank everyone for being so accommodating and nice." We will now hear from Arizona Attorney General Mays. As a reminder, she will not be taking any questions today in this room. Attorney General.
As Arizona voters have affirmed and Arizona courts have reinforced, the death penalty is the law of the land in Arizona. As Arizona's top law enforcement official, it is my duty to enforce the law of our state. Today, that duty has been carried out. Leroy McGill has been executed by the state of Arizona for the 2002 murder of Charles Perez. Mr. McGill was convicted in 2004 after a jury found him guilty on all counts, including the first-degree premeditated murder of Mr. Perez and the attempted murder of a second victim, Nova Bonta. My thoughts today are with the family and the loved ones of Charles Perez, as well as with Nova Bonta. Thank you.
Thank you, AG Mays. Appreciate you. I will now turn it over to media witnesses who will come up starting from the Associated Press, followed by 12 News. They will introduce themselves and their media affiliation, then take questions from the podium.
My name is Josh Kennedy with the Associated Press. At 10:01 a.m., staff brought him in and began strapping him down on the table. I did not observe any resistance on his part. At 10:04 a.m., the curtains were opened. At 10:06 a.m., I observed the IV insertion in the left arm, excuse me, the right arm. And I observed one attempt. At 10:07, I observed an IV insertion attempt on the other arm and one attempt with that one as well. I also heard during his last words, Leroy say, "I'm going home soon." At 10:12, I observed the first black syringe get pushed. Shortly after, I observed the first green syringe get pushed. At 10:13, I observed deep breaths. At 10:13, he made what sounded like a snoring sound. At 10:13, the second green went in, and at 10:14, the snoring sound went silent. At 10:15, the black syringe, the second one went in. At that point, there was no movement. Does anyone have any questions?
So were there 4 syringes total?
Yes. White clothing.
Were the 4 syringes the ones needed?
I can't speak to the procedure, but I observed 4 total syringes, 2 black, 2 green.
Was there anyone else in the room when you recognized? Anybody else was there?
Attorney General Chris Mays was there, and Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell.
Were they the only 2 besides you?
No, there were other individuals, but I don't know their identities.
Did McGill seem to experience any pain or any kind of seizures?
I can't speak to whether or not he experienced pain.
Aside from his clothing, any personal items?
I did not observe any personal items.
Any observations inside the chamber? Someone there that was
Some individuals appear to be crying. I don't know who.
Was he wearing any shoes?
I can't speak to that.
Good morning. My name is Sean Rice. I am a television journalist with 12 News. This morning, I just wanted to start by saying, as much as the name Leroy McGill will be spoken this morning, I also want the name Charles Perez, Nova Banta, Jack Yates, Jeffrey Ewell, all the victims' names to be known as well. Throughout this process, reporting in anticipation of witnessing this execution, I had a chance to speak with the now retired homicide detective of Phoenix Police, Tommy Kulesa, who helped put Leroy McGill behind bars. And one quote that he had that stuck with me before I give my observations is, throughout the last 22 years on death row, Leroy McGill has had the opportunity to speak for himself, use his own voice. Charles Perez has not. And so that's why he worked as hard as he did to put Leroy McGill behind bars. So this process started for me at 9:55. We were loaded into a car in transport to the building where this execution was carried out. At 9:58, we were let in. When you enter this building, it's a very small building. There's 3 rows of bench-style seating, all black seating. That's where we saw to the right. You see a big panel of glass with black curtains behind it. In each corner, there is big black, not big, but television screens that when you first walk in could see an overhead view of the gurney on the right TV. There's one in the middle that showed all of the syringes laid out on what appeared to be a table. And then the left TV had another overhead view of the gurney. At this point, Mr. McGill had not entered the room. He was let in at 10:01. He immediately approached the gurney, laid down with no emotion. 10:02, we spent multiple minutes waiting before the curtains were open. At this point, we could only see him through the monitors. At 10:04 is when the curtains opened. What I could see throughout multiple minutes was him just taking deep breaths in and out. Not through his mouth, through his nose, but you could see his abdomen coming up and down through those deep breaths. You see 4 workers, all dressed in white, Department of Corrections employees. You couldn't see their identities. They were completely covered. The only thing you could see was their eyes, all dressed in all white, as McGill was dressed in all white himself. They spent multiple minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, approaching his right and left arms, looking for a suitable vein to insert the IVs. That process went swimmingly. I didn't see any issue at all finding a vein on either arm. They then spent multiple minutes hooking him up to those IVs on each arm. At one point, he did look over to the right at all of us in attendance. He sort of scanned the room and then nodded to people who were seated directly behind me. I don't know for sure, but I suspect those may be family members of his. Several minutes later, he then uttered, when asked if he had last words, thank you everyone for being so accommodating and nice, as the director said, and I did hear I'm going home soon as well. A priest then entered, who I suspect was a priest, entered the room, stood right at his head, and offered a blessing. It was a little bit hard to hear for me in the room, but it started as what I know as the Lord's Prayer. He started saying, "The Lord is my shepherd." He offered remission to all of McGill's sins, and at the end of that prayer, Leroy McGill said, quote, "Amen." At 10:12, I witnessed all of the syringes start to be pushed in. I did see 4 and then another 4, but throughout this process, the 4 on the left did not have to be used, according to my witness. Throughout the process, it appeared painless. The only thing we witnessed was those long, deep breaths as the lethal injection was carried out, and then that snoring sound. I would say this went on for maybe 30 seconds to a minute from my observations. After that, there was multiple minutes of just silence. Nobody, of course, saying anything, and no reaction whatsoever from Leroy McGill. The only thing I witnessed from 10:16 to the time of death at 10:26 was a slight twitching on the right side of his head, and I witnessed that at 10:22. Didn't appear to be anything major, but just you could see the skin on the right side of his head start to move a little bit, and that was at 10:22, so 4 minutes before time of death at 10:26. That was somebody came in, read that 10:26 was the time of death, the curtains closed, and minutes later we were escorted out. Any questions? Perfect. Yeah.
Obviously, it was a really
You know, it's tough. It's the one, I've been saying in anticipation of this, it's the one part of the criminal justice system I've had no interaction with and had no idea how this process of our justice system was carried out. Witness murder trials, sexual assault trials, heinous evidence being brought forth that you have to witness. But I felt calm throughout this entire 30-minute process that we were inside this room. So you just kind of roll with it in stride and no sort of reaction now. Yeah.
Is there no overall feeling from anyone else in the room besides yourself who felt?
Yeah, so as this was carried out, over my shoulder, there was 2 women sitting behind me, and then over my right shoulder, there were 4 people, a woman and then 3 men. Didn't recognize any of them. Wasn't sure if they were victims' family members. It appears they weren't, but maybe they're Leroy McGill's family members, and multiple instances of sobbing behind me from the women. And then I remember hearing, once the time of death was read, a man to my right said something to the effect of, "I hope it stays that way." So that's what I heard to my right. But emotional, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate that. As our media briefing comes to an end, please remember the following. First, there will be no media interviews here on the property. You are, however, welcome to film stand-ups in the staging area off of 79 Butte, right over here. The staging area will close in 2 hours. If you have any questions for ADCRR, please reach out to our media team at media@azadc.gov. Lastly, we'll keep this room open for about 30 minutes for any wrap-up that you may have. This concludes our media briefing today, and thank you for attending.